So apparently, somehow, I messed up my knee a little bit. So it's actually Friday when I'm recording this. I had to kind of rest my knee a little bit. I actually had to get a knee brace yesterday. It turns out that I am, in fact, getting old and can no longer sit crisscrossed anymore because apparently that puts too much pressure on my knees. And I put too much pressure on my right leg. So my right knee is actually hurting worse than my left knee. So I had to get a knee brace and I had to kind of stay off my leg a little bit for a couple days so it could heal. And that was not fun. So anyway, welcome to this episode of Divergence and Divine. My name is WIllspiration. As always, you know the whole shtick, spiel, etc. Gonna wing it as always. But that's kind of why today's episode is going to be a little late on being put up. So I kind of wanted to start off today with just kind of exploring what I like to call the growth mindset, because it's kind of funny because I had my therapy appointment with my therapist yesterday and my life coaching with my Reiki teacher yesterday as well. And my therapist was telling me about how she's just amazed by the growth that I've made within the year that I've been seeing her, which I think is actually very beneficial because she's actually autistic herself. And I think I've mentioned this before in other episodes, but autistic therapists do exist that are actually neurodivergent themselves. They are out there. They're a little hard to find, but they do exist. And I think that's kind of really what has helped me a lot. And then just kind of at work with my supervisor that was my former team lead, I know that he's helped a lot as well. He's told me how much I've improved since working there. And I know several people have told me that I know personally how impressed they are with my growth that I've made in a year. So it's kind of hard to not be proud of the growth that I've made. And I feel like that's something that I want to talk about because I also kind of brought this up on Reddit because I saw someone on Reddit post something about how they're just tired of being on the spectrum. So I guess I kind of wanted to talk on that and the growth mindset and just kind of help people not feel ashamed about being on the spectrum on this episode. So one of the things that really has helped me is just really accepting who I am, because there's a difference between accepting your neurodivergence and leading with your neurodivergence. And this is kind of one of those things that I recently learned that I was just like, oh wow, that's pretty crazy. I didn't even think about that. So when you lead with your neurodivergence, you're essentially, I just hit the mic with my chin. I didn't realize I had it that close to my face. But anyway, when you lead with your neurodivergence, you're essentially saying, hey, I'm autistic. Autism defines me. Autism is what I am and who I am. So you kind of, in a way, identify as your neurodivergence when you say that, as opposed to being like, I am, for example, for myself, it's like, I am Will. I'm a human being that has autism. And while autism is a part of me, it doesn't define who I am. Because by letting your autism or ADHD, or if you have both like me, by letting it define who you are, it kind of sets limitations on yourself. And I didn't think this was true until I stopped leading with my neurodivergence. And then I realized, wow, when I say that it's just a part of me, but it doesn't define who I am, all of a sudden I feel like these limiters, like these shackles, kind of have been broken, and I don't feel as stuck. I feel like it's the autism and the ADHD kind of give me a lower ceiling, so to speak, but it makes it a lot easier to push past those ceilings, so to speak, and be able to achieve things that I didn't think were possible. Like, for example, me doing this podcast and me becoming a Reiki master teacher pretty soon, and me working 3 12-hour days, which I also got to work overtime this weekend, or I guess not weekend, but because I work the weekend shift, but definitely most likely Tuesday and Wednesday I'm going to have to do overtime. Tuesday for sure, but Wednesday, maybe. I know I can handle 3 days, so I'm proud because I thought it would be really hard, and it's actually not as bad mentally as I thought. A little rough physically, but nothing that I can't handle. So it's just kind of, it's things like that where I go, wow, for someone that's on the spectrum and for someone that has ADHD, I can do a lot of things that I didn't think were possible. And I think for a lot of people on the spectrum, that's kind of like the biggest thing is we feel limited. And the thing about being on the spectrum is it affects everyone differently. So it's like, the biggest thing is like, regardless of what level you are and regardless of how, being autistic affects you, the thing is like, that I would say is basically just be proud to be neurodivergent, own it, but don't let it define you completely. And just be like, I'm still a human being. Just because I have something that makes life a little more challenging for me doesn't mean that I still can't achieve something. Like, if you're listening to this right now and, you're like level 2 or level 3, and even if you're nonverbal, it's like, still, if there are things that you can do that you feel like others with autism that affects them similarly to you can't do, I mean, that's still something to be proud of, because I feel like when you have a more positive mindset and you put your mind to it, you'd be surprised on what you can and can't do. I mean, because I'll admit, I still struggle to do things like, cooking. Like, that's something I still struggle with. Because, cooking is very overwhelming. But I also have 4 days off now, so it's just like, I can kind of start to learn that, hey, with cooking, you have to prepare stuff. You have to clean. And I don't think, part of that is the autism. I mean, part of it is the autism, but I feel like that's more ADHD and impulsivity and not having the attention span and patience to actually cook for myself. And then there's just kind of the over stimulation of preparing everything and then, trying not to get hurt while cooking and and prepping the food. And, it just feels very tedious and it's kind of scary. So I don't think that, I think is more so both. But it kind of leans a little more into the ADHD than the autism. But still, I mean, there's a lot of things that I can do that I've learned to overcome. Like, when I first started working at my job, I would have to wear earplugs. And it's just like, even now, it's like the only time I ever wear earplugs at work is if I'm going to be working inside of a room with machinery that is loud, where it's actually required. And even if it's not required, if I feel like, man, this thing is really loud, and I personally think that people should be wearing earplugs regardless. I don't know how they can, say it, earplugs aren't required, because it is pretty loud, but not in a point where it's debilitating and, I feel like I want to cry because it's loud. I know I've mentioned this in previous episodes about when I was younger, even when I was 7, I was afraid of fireworks still. A firework would go off while I was outside, and I would scream, and then I would start crying. I think it was around 9 or 10 where I finally got used to every 4th of July, fireworks are loud. It's fine. It's kind of, it was just building up tolerance to it. And I know that a lot of people, it is debilitating, and no amount of, trying to build up tolerance will make it any better, because again, being on the spectrum affects everyone differently. So it's like, I always say, try to like push your limits. And if you absolutely can't, and you know that it's something that debilitates you, there's no shame in that at all. Like, you at least tested the waters, you tried, and it's okay. It's okay to accept that, hey, you know what? I can't handle loud noises. It's totally fine. Then you just wear headphones, or, whatever you need to cancel that out. It's like, for me, something that, like, my nerves are just very sensitive, and I'm just very sensitive to touch in general. And I have like a low pain tolerance and a pain threshold. So like, I'm just super sensitive to touch and pain in general. So for me, it's kind of like physical things just feel weird. Like, I'm also very ticklish in some spots too. And I'm kind of debating if I actually want to mention this or not. But like, I have had, it's so weird because this isn't geared towards kids, but like, I know that like this might reach, like teenagers. So like, I don't want to say the word, but like, I am going to kind of mention it, I guess, because it just feels weird with me being 32 to not say the word. But, yes, I have had sex, and, that intimate act of having sex was kind of hard, because it's just like, with me being sensitive to touch, sometimes, being intimate with my, ex at that time, was kind of hard, because it's just like, I found out my back is ticklish. So like, when she would like rub my back, it would make me laugh, and it'd just make it harder for me to concentrate on having sex, because then it's like, oh, my back tickles and I'm like laughing. You know what I mean? Like, there are, like, for me, like, touch is my kind of my weakest thing, or like weakness, I guess, in terms of being on the spectrum. I mean, I've learned to live with it, but at the same time, it's just, it can be annoying. But, that's kind of why, for me, it's just kind of like, no amount of, slapping my, I'm going to have to edit that out. No amount of slapping myself, or like, lightly punching myself, has ever helped build up the pain tolerance. Like, I am just sensitive no matter what. And it's kind of something that I had to learn to accept, because people would always make fun of me, because it's just like, wow, you're so weak, or, oh, stop being a baby. And it's just like, now it's just like, bro, I've tried. Trust me. I've tried my whole life. Like, this is just the one thing that autism just is essentially like my autistic kryptonite. It's just like, you want to shut me down, just like fucking hit me, and that's it. Like, you slap me in the face, I will probably cry. I am a 32-year-old man, and my sensory issues with touch is just that bad that like, I just can't handle pain. So even then, like, I've still learned how to like not cry. Like, I hit my shin really hard at work one time, and I had a bruise on my shin for a couple of days. I went through the little rotating bar gate at the entrance of my work so fast that for whatever reason, the bar didn't rotate right, and it just kind of slapped me again in the thigh, and I had a nasty bruise on my thigh for like a week, and it was painful, and I had to ice it when I got home, and it was horrible. Like, showering was like the worst for that first week while I was kind of healing. But it's just kind of like that. It is what it is. But hey, I didn't cry, so that's good. I mean, that's something to be proud of. But I just kind of feel like you let the things that are debilitating keep you from trying to push yourself and trying to experiment and learn like what you literally cannot do and cannot take, and what you can and what you can build tolerance up to. And I feel like that's kind of where a lot of people struggle. It's like, oh, you're autistic, you have a disability, and this is what it is. But you never know, because it's just like there are some things that you can build up a tolerance to, and there are just some things that you can't. And it's just kind of, I think for me, going undiagnosed for so long, I just kind of learned how to build up tolerance to a lot of things, and then like how to use said building of tolerance to my advantage, and just kind of learning to work around my weaknesses and my strengths. And it's just, I feel like it's really paid off. And really, you also want to like surround yourself with people that are actually going to want to see you grow and succeed, and really not patronize you for, being autistic, or, make you feel like you're less than, and kind of like what a lot of people say, infantize you, like treat you like a kid because you're autistic. Because I'm sorry, neurotypicals, but just because somebody is autistic doesn't mean that you can treat them like a kid when they're an adult. There are certain times where, I'll be honest, like, I would love to be a child, and I would love to be like held when I'm having a meltdown and things like that. But like, generally speaking, I am an adult, and you can't treat me as such just because I say I'm autistic. I think also with how ADHD affects me and how my autism affects me, I feel like a lot of it has kind of canceled itself, like has canceled each other out in a lot of ways, where like I just can't be on ADHD meds because then my autism becomes more noticeable, because it just kind of, it's essentially its own thing. Like, they kind of contradict each other. So a lot of things are just kind of null and void. And I feel like that's what made it really hard for me to get diagnosed, because when I went to get diagnosed with autism and ADHD the first time when I was 25, I got diagnosed with ADHD but not autism. And then when I was 27, I went and got tested by someone that was an actual, like able to actually do this. And he said that I was autistic, but just barely. Like, because of the fact that it was really hard to tell, because there's an overlap with autism and ADHD. And then I also feel like, and maybe, I don't know if there's studies on this or not, but I feel like it's possible that autism and ADHD can affect each other in a way where it could make things worse, or it can actually cancel things out and make it not as bad. So for me, I'm talking from my personal experience, but I feel like even if you have autism, like, I feel like it's still kind of a good way to kind of try and see, because it's like, I kind of don't like how it's put on you that like, oh, you're disabled, and, accept it and that's it. I feel like there's just, when you limit somebody like that, it doesn't help, I feel like people should really grow and explore themselves and not be told that they can't do anything, because I just don't feel like that's right. You know what I mean? It's not fair to those people that they're told, oh, you're autistic, you're never gonna be able to do this, and that. Let the person try. Let that person try and do their best, because by telling them they can't, they're truly gonna believe that they can't do anything without any sort of support. And I feel like regardless of what level you're on, you're always gonna need some level of support. And I think that's kind of one thing that you have to accept. But you shouldn't have to accept that because you might need support in a couple of things, that you can't do other things by yourself. Like for me, like, yeah, I'm very disorganized. And yeah, I struggle to keep my apartment clean, and I struggle to do dishes. But I do them. And a lot of that is from executive dysfunction, which both ADHD and autism can bring on as a symptom. But even then, I still do pretty good to get around to doing it. And then, obviously I struggle to cook. But those are like really the only two things that I would need help on. But I'm still able to do it. It's just sometimes there are days where it'd be nice to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling to cook, can you make dinner tonight? Because I'm single. I'm single, so I live by myself. But it would be nice to have, when I do find whoever that person is for me, and I find, my soulmate, that I end up with a woman that's just would understand that and be totally okay with letting me cook, but kind of just being there. So if I go, hey, I don't feel comfortable doing this, can you do this for me really quick? Because then it's just I'm still doing the cooking, but if I get to something where I don't feel comfortable or I feel like I can't do it, I'm getting a little overwhelmed, then she can step in and do it really quick. And then after that, I just keep going from there. And then just kind of, because I'm sure at some point I'll be able to learn how to do cook and stuff. But even then, it's just kind of there might be times where I get overwhelmed that I need to step away for a second and just kind of, instead of letting it sit there, it's at least there's another person that kind of pick up where I left off, and then for a couple minutes, and then I come back and I just keep going. But even if you have a roommate, even then having a roommate would also help too, because then you can just ask the person if they could take over for a couple minutes while you kind of decompress for a second. And then I think that's a great segue into also just going back to the accepting that you're on the spectrum and accepting who you are, also requires loving yourself. And I feel a lot of us kind of lean into we think so negatively about being on the spectrum and being limited on things, and just kind of feeling we don't amount to a lot of what neurotypicals do, because we're kind of just told, hey, you're disabled, you'll never be as good as a neurotypical because you're disabled and your brain is wired differently. So you won't be able to operate in this world as effectively as a neurotypical person does. Okay, so what? Then I'll just interpret the world in my own way. And I feel that's the thing, is that we're still neurodivergents, especially autistic people, are so outnumbered, that we just kind of, I think of last time I checked the statistics, I think we're only 1.5% of the world's population. So we are heavily outnumbered. In order for this world to start changing to a more neurodivergent focused world, it would have to at least be a quarter of the world's population for it be, for people to kind of start going, okay, well, now that it's on the rise, we got to start making, adjustments and incorporating neurodivergence into everyday life. But that probably won't happen for a long time. So we are kind of forced to try to operate in a neurotypical world. But I know that there's some of you out there that probably don't think that you can, but there are some of you out there that do possess the ability to be able to bridge the gap between neurodivergence and neurotypicals. And personally, it all depends on how autism affects you, and if you have autism and ADHD, and it affects you in a way where you're able to still kind of understand a neurotypical standpoint, but be able to explain a neurodivergent standpoint to a neurotypical in a neurotypical way, then you kind of have something special about you. And I feel for me, that's kind of another thing that I can do, is explain a neurodivergent standpoint from a neurotypical standpoint, and then kind of explain a neurotypical standpoint from a neurodivergent standpoint. And that's kind of something that's very hard to do. And I feel we think it's rare, but maybe it's not as rare as we think. I feel sometimes it's just kind of a limit, we're just kind of put in that limited mindset rather than in a growth mindset. And I just kind of feel there's more to this, and we are just being told that there isn't, and it kind of sucks. And then even just from a metaphysical and a spiritual standpoint, they do say that what you put out is what you attract. So being in a more positive and growth mindset will bring you, better things. And then, if you're in a more negative mindset, it brings more negative things. Now, I'm not saying that it's entirely true, but I do think that that does kind of have an effect on, your mindset. I do believe that it does help bring more good things to you when you have that growth mindset. Obviously, life is still going to throw whatever curveballs your way that it has planned. So there's going to be times where you can have a positive mindset and life is still going to throw you a curveball and it's going to suck. And you're going to be like, how? I'm always positive. Like, I'm always in a good mood. I'm always in a positive mindset. Why did this have to happen to me? I mean, life just does what life does. Life always gives you tests to grow and, see how much you've grown. So, if you feel like your positive mindset isn't attracting positive things, it could just be life testing you. So don't give up on that just because life is not going the way that you want, that, it's because you're not positive enough. It's just, there's always going to be tests in life that you got to face, whether you like it or not. It happens to everybody. But definitely having a more growth-oriented, positive mindset always helps. And I think that's kind of really the biggest takeaway here, is just kind of owning and just learning to accept your autism and ADHD and just your neurodivergence as a whole. Because I just feel like we're just so limited to what we can and can't do that we just kind of settle for that rather than kind of pushing the limits on our own and seeing what's true and what's not. I think the other thing that I want to touch on, I usually try to keep these episodes about 40 minutes. So the last thing I want to touch on, because my throat is getting kind of a little sore, because normally I don't talk this much. So I'm kind of a little more passionate about this topic today. So I'm just constantly talking and I can kind of feel it in my throat. It's starting to get a little sore. So I'm going to probably keep this next section a little brief. But I think the other thing too is going back to to that is also when it comes to workplace, is finding a workplace that does accept neurodivergence. Again, they are out there. They're a little bit more rare because a lot of places, they want neurotypical people because they see neurodivergence as a hindrance and a liability. But not every place is like that. They're just very hard to find. And I feel like I got very lucky where I work, because when I got hired in after being a temp, in their system that they use, there is a question when you're setting up your account if you are neurodivergent, and if you click yes, it'll give you a list of different things of neurodivergence to check off, and autism and ADHD are in there. But at my work, there are a lot of people that, are autistic or are ADHD or do have both. And, I feel like there's a lot of people that don't even realize that, that they're just undiagnosed and they just kind of have learned to live with it and just learn to accept and love themselves. That, I don't think getting that diagnosis would change anything. And there are a lot of, I just feel like that place in general has more neurodivergence than the average workplace. And it's kind of what I think makes the atmosphere so much better, because you're working in a place where it's more accepted and it's more of a normal thing. And it's just kind of I've kind of learned to be able to bridge that gap of neurotypical and neurodivergence, because it's just kind of oh, okay. I'm so used to, hearing things explained from a neurotypical standpoint and a neurodivergent standpoint, where it's okay, I'm kind of learning how to translate a little bit more between both. But that also helps a lot. If you can work a full-time job or even a part-time job, that you find a place like that, because it does make a difference and it does help a lot. And there's also just less worry about having to disclose it, because typically if an employer doesn't ask you if you're neurodivergent, then they typically don't or wouldn't accept neurodivergent people. So if you were to disclose that information, then you would be treated differently. And then they would start infantizing you, and they'll start, seeing you as a problem, because then they're like, oh, well, we need to change the schedule. Oh, well, this person doesn't like change because, autistic people like routines. Okay, yes, that's true, but not every autistic person is going to react as, harshly as, another autistic person. Like some people could be like, I hate this. It sucks, but I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm not going to, make a scene about it. I'm just going to keep the annoyance in, but I'll live. And then there's other people on the spectrum that, that'll just devastate them and they'll just have a full-blown meltdown. And that's kind of the thing that I feel like a lot of employers try to avoid, is because they don't want to deal with that. But there are a lot of places where they have a set schedule, so you kind of want to work at a place where you're not scheduled to work and, you're scheduled on this day, and then they can just switch up your schedule last minute and be like, oh, we need you to come in tomorrow. It's just easier to work at a place where your schedule is always the same. Like at my work, it's always first, second, and third shift. You're always, guaranteed to work Monday through Friday. And then you have your times. And the only thing that changes is what line you work on. And then for the weekend shift, weekend shift A is Friday through Sunday, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. And then weekend shift C, which is the one that I'm on, is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Saturday through Monday. And then weekend shift B is Friday through Sunday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then weekend shift D is Saturday through Monday, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But you're always going to work those days. Nothing's going to change about your schedule aside from like holidays, because you have to get your holidays off on the days that you work. But generally speaking, they're never going to change the schedule on you. So that's another thing, is to always look for a place where you have a set schedule that's never going to change. Otherwise, it's just kind of, it becomes harder and more annoying. And especially because then they can also use that as an excuse to cut back your hours if you work at a place where your schedule is subject to change, especially if you disclose your neurodivergence. But you just got to look for the right place to work at. There are places out there, and I can guarantee you that there are places out there. They're just harder to find. So if there is any takeaway from this episode, is accept and love yourself for being on the spectrum, for being ADHD, being neurodivergence in general, but don't let it define you. Don't lead with it. You're still a human being, and that's just a part of you, but it's not all of you. Learn to push yourself and, have that growth mindset. Learn what your limits are. See if you can push past those limits. And if you can't, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you can, great. It's even better. And really just find a place that if you can work, try to find a place where neurodivergence is accepted, where, that you won't be infantized or patronized for being, neurodivergent, where you can actually succeed and grow, and that pretty much those places exist. They are out there. You just gotta look for them. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's episode of Divergence and Divine. As always, if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. If you want to get notifications on when these episodes go up, hit the bell. Like the video if you enjoyed it or if it helped you out. It means a lot, and I'm just really happy to be able to do this and help people out. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.